Welcome back to Inside the Philippines, where we sit down with the men who came here looking for something and found out what it cost them. Today's story belongs to a man named Murray, 59 years old, from Fort McMurray up in Alberta, Canada. Oil country. The kind of cold most of you couldn't imagine, and the kind of work that breaks a body down slow over 40 years. Murray wasn't a drinker chasing bar girls. He wasn't some wide-eyed tourist who fell for the first pretty face in a nightclub. He was a widower, a quiet, careful man who'd already lost the one person who needed him, and who came into all of this armored, suspicious, certain it wouldn't happen to him. That's what makes this one different. Because it did happen to him. Just not the way any of you are expecting. This is a story about a good woman who may have genuinely cared for him. It's about a house he paid for that was never his. And it's about the day Murray finally understood what a whole family had been calling him behind his back, and what he decided to do about it. I'm not going to spoil it. You need to hear this one the way he tells it. Because there's a moment near the end where Murray does something most men in his position never have the nerve to do, and his girlfriend had no idea it was coming. This one's going to stick with you. Here's Murray, in his own words. People think the hard part of losing your wife is the funeral. It's not. The funeral, you've got people around, casseroles showing up, Cheryl's sister organizing everybody. You're busy. The hard part is about 3 weeks after, when everybody's gone back to their lives and you're standing in your own kitchen at 6 in the morning and there's nothing to do. Nobody to make coffee for. That's the part nobody tells you about. The quiet. I worked the rigs and then the oil sands my whole life. 40 years. Started as a roughneck when I was 19, dumb as a post, and I stayed in it right up till the end. 2 weeks on, 1 week off, most of it. You learn things out there. You learn to shut up and work. You learn who you can trust with your life, because some days that's literally what it comes down to. And you learn to save your words. Guys who talk too much on a rig, they make mistakes. So I got quiet. Cheryl used to say, getting a sentence out of me was like getting oil out of a dry hole. Cheryl. We were married 31 years, and the last 3 of those, she was sick. I'm not going to get into all of it, but it was long, and it was slow, and near the end I was doing everything. Feeding her, turning her so she wouldn't get sores. I had the medication schedule down better than the nurses did. I had it on a whiteboard in the kitchen, times and doses, and I never missed one. Not once in 3 years. And then she was gone, and the whiteboard was still up on the wall with her afternoon pills written on it in my own handwriting, and I couldn't bring myself to wipe it off for about 4 months. Here's the thing I'm ashamed to say. When somebody dies slow like that, you brace for the grief. Everybody tells you it's coming. This wave. And I waited for it. And it didn't come. Not like they said. What came instead was just nothing. Flat. Empty. Like when the drill stops on a rig and your ears ring from the sudden quiet. That was me for about a year. A ringing quiet. I had money, is the stupid part. One sold our house, and Cheryl's mother had passed the year before and left her place to us. So I sold that too. Between the 2 houses and what we'd put away, I was sitting on about $210,000. Plus my pension, the OAS, and the CPP, so call it $2,200 a month coming in. More money than a roughneck's got any business having. And not one single idea what it was for. The guys from my old crew called for a while. Then they didn't. You can't blame them. What are they going to say? There's only so many times a man can ask how you're holding up before you both run out of road. Except Doug. Doug wouldn't quit. Doug and I go back 30 years. He'd retired a couple years before me, and, this is the part that matters, Doug had gone and married a Filipina. Gal from Iloilo, half his age, and I'll be honest, when he told me, I thought he'd lost his mind. Thought she was after his money. I said as much to his face, because that's the kind of friends we are. But Doug seemed happy. Genuinely. He'd send me photos. Him on some beach. Him at a birthday party with about 40 of her relatives. Him grinning like an idiot in a place where it was 30 degrees and sunny while I was scraping ice off my truck. He'd call me up. "You're turning into a ghost, Murray. Half a ghost. Sitting in that house talking to nobody." He wasn't wrong. I'd catch myself talking to the dog, and I didn't even have a dog anymore. The dog went 2 months after Cheryl, so I was talking to nobody at all, which is worse. Doug kept at me for months. "Get on one of these sites," he'd say, "just to talk to somebody. Not even romance. Just, a bit of company. There's a Christian one," he told me, "for people who want something serious. Not the bar stuff." I told him no about 100 times. I thought the whole thing was pathetic, if I'm honest. Old white guys buying themselves girlfriends off the internet. I'd read the forums Doug pointed me at. There's these expat forums where the fellas swap horror stories, and every second post was some poor bastard who'd got taken for his savings. Girl he'd never met asking for money by the third message. Sob stories. Sick mothers. I read all that, and I thought, not me. Never me. I built pipelines in 40 below. I'm not getting played by a stranger with a phone. But it's a funny thing, being that alone. You hold a position, and you hold it, and you hold it, and then one wet Tuesday night in November, you find yourself sitting there with a beer. And the house is doing that ringing quiet thing again, and you think, well, what's the harm in looking? That's all it was, that first night. I told myself I was just looking. Just to prove Doug wrong, mostly. I'd get on there, see it was a bunch of scammers, and I'd have it settled, and I could tell him to leave me alone about it. So I made a profile. Took me an hour because I didn't have a single decent photo of just myself. Every picture I had, Cheryl was in it too, and I couldn't use those. Ended up using one from a fishing trip. Squinting into the sun. Looked like a man who'd rather be anywhere else, which was about right. And that's where I met Rosalie. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because the thing about Rosalie, the thing that got me, the thing that was different from every horror story in those forums, was that she didn't ask me for a single thing. Not for the longest time. I gave it 2 weeks before I quit. That was the deal I made with myself. 2 weeks on that Christian Filipina site, and when it turned out to be exactly the racket I knew it was, I'd delete the thing and tell Doug I'd tried it, and he could stop nagging me. Because I'd done my homework. That's the thing about 40 years on the rigs. You don't walk onto a new site without knowing where the dangers are. So before I ever made that profile, I'd gone through Doug's expat forums, page after page of them, and I'd read every horror story going. And there's a pattern to them. Once you've read enough. Fella gets on there, pretty girl messages him first, all sunshine and God bless you, and by about the 3rd or 4th message, there's a problem. Always a problem. A sick mother. A sister who needs school fees. A phone that broke. Something. And it's never much at first. $20, $50 just to help out. And then it's a river. So that's what I was watching for. The ask. And the first week, hoo boy, did I get proof. I had maybe 15 women message me in the first few days. Half of them opened with, "Hi, honey," which, I'm 59, I've got a face like a catcher's mitt, And I'm supposed to believe a 24-year-old is calling me honey off a squinting fishing photo. Come on, a couple of them got to the money part inside a day. One girl, sweet as anything, told me her carabao had died, and she needed help buying a new one. A water buffalo. I actually laughed out loud at that one. 10 out of 10 for originality, love, but no. I was about ready to call it. Told Doug on the phone, it's exactly what I said it was. Bunch of scammers. And he just laughed at me and said, "You're doing it wrong, you miserable old goat. You're going for the wrong ones. Look for the ones who aren't looking at you." Didn't know what he meant at the time. Do now. Rosalie messaged me on about day 9, and the thing that got me, the very first thing, was how ordinary it was. No hi, honey. No heart emojis. She'd seen on my profile that I was from Canada, and she just asked, plainly, whether it was true that it got so cold there that your nose hairs froze. Somebody had told her that, and she didn't believe it. That was the whole message. I don't know why, but I answered. Told her, yeah, it's true, 40 below and worse, and the trick is, you breathe through a scarf. And she wrote back this long thing about how she couldn't even imagine cold like that, how the coldest she'd ever been was one time up in the mountains near Canleon, and she'd thought she was going to die. And it was maybe 18 degrees Celsius. I told her 18 was t-shirt weather where I'm from, and she said I must be a polar bear. That was it. That was the first night. No romance, no money, nothing. Just a woman laughing at how cold my country was. She was 38, not 24, 38, which already put her in a different category in my head, because the 24-year-olds were plainly working an angle. Used to be a grade school teacher, she said, out in a barangay outside Bacolod, on Negros, sugar country. She'd left the teaching because it didn't pay, and she was running a little sari-sari store now, one of those tiny front-of-the-house shops that sell single cigarettes and sachets of shampoo and warm Coke. And she was helping raise her late brother's 3 kids. Her brother had passed. Motorcycle, a hobble-hobble, on one of those mountain roads. She didn't make a big weepy thing of it, just said it flat, the way you say a hard thing you've already carried a long way. We talked most nights after that, and here's what I keep coming back to, the thing I need you to understand. She never asked me for a single thing. Not a peso. Not once. Not for months. She'd send me photos. Not of herself, mostly. Of the sugar cane, this green so bright it didn't look real, going right up to the foot of the volcano. Of the kids in their school uniforms. Of the rain coming across the fields in the afternoon. She sent me a video once, just so I could hear it. The karaoke machine 2 houses down, murdering some Air Supply song, and roosters going off in the background even though it was the middle of the afternoon, and her laughing behind the camera. I must have watched that thing 20 times. My kitchen in Fort McMurray, 40 below outside, and there's this warm, noisy green place coming out of my phone. We'd video call. That was another thing. She'd video call no problem, right from the start. No excuses. No, my camera is broken. I'd read on the forums that dodging the video call was the big red flag. Rosalie was the opposite. Sometimes she'd call me just to have me there while she minded the store, prop the phone up on a rice sack, and I'd watch her sell a neighbor a sachet of coffee, and we'd barely even talk. Just company. You know what that's worth to a man rattling around an empty house? You can't put a price on it. Though I suppose, in the end, somebody did. She was religious. Properly, not for show. She'd say things like, God has a plan, even for lonely people, especially for lonely people. And she meant it, you could tell. First few times, I'll be honest, it made me a bit uncomfortable. I'm not much of a churchgoer. Gave most of that up when Cheryl got sick, on account of I'd been doing a fair bit of praying that didn't get answered. But Rosalie never pushed it on me. It was just how she saw things. God had taken her brother and taken my Cheryl, and here we both were, two lonely people who'd found each other across the whole world. She thought that meant something, and well, I wanted it to mean something. That's the honest truth. I was 59, and I'd spent 3 years watching the only person I loved disappear an inch at a time. And here was this warm, funny, decent woman who lit up when my ugly mug showed up on her screen and who never once put her hand out. I told Doug about her, expected him to be pleased with himself. Instead, he went a bit quiet and said, "Just take it slow, Murray. The good ones are real, but take it slow." I remember being a little annoyed at that. Take it slow. What did he think I was, some horny kid? 2 months in, I hadn't sent her $1, and I'd stopped counting the days till I could quit the site. I wasn't quitting anything. I was up at odd hours doing the math on the time difference. 14 hours. Negros is 14 hours ahead, so I could catch her in the morning, her time. She had me. She had me completely, and she'd done it without asking for one thing. That was the genius of it, if it even was genius. I still don't know if it was a plan or if it was just her. But I know I'd have signed anything those first couple months. Nobody'd asked me for a thing yet, see? That came later. 4 months of this, and I still hadn't sent her a peso. But I'd booked a flight. That was my idea, understand? Not hers. She never once said, "When are you coming?" If anything, she was the one going slow. She'd say things like, "I don't want you to spend all that money just for me." And I'd wave it off. I had the money. What else was I doing with it? So I booked it. Cebu Pacific down through Manila to Bacolod Sile, and a room at a proper hotel in the city, not out in the barangay. The flights and the 2 weeks in the hotel came to about $180,000 all in. Call it $4,300. Spent on myself. That's how I squared it in my head. I wasn't giving her anything. I was buying my own plane ticket like any man would. You want to know what stepping off that plane is like for a fella who's spent his whole life in the cold? The door opens and it's like walking into a wet towel. The heat just leans on you. Sale Airport's this little thing, and outside there's tricycles lined up, these motorbikes with sidecars welded on, and the drivers all calling out, and the smell, diesel and something sweet burning and the sugar mills going somewhere off past the cane. I stood there sweating through my good shirt, 60 near enough, thinking, what in God's name am I doing here? And then she came round the barrier, and she was just her. That's what got me. Same face from the video calls, no filter, no fuss, in a plain shirt and flip-flops, and she looked nervous as anything, twisting her hands. Not one of these glamour girls off the forums. A real woman, a bit tired around the eyes, 38 years old, and when she saw me, she did this little laugh and said, "So, the polar bear is real." We didn't fall into each other's arms or any of that. She was proper about it. Shy, even. That mattered to me, too. The next few days, she showed me her world. The store first. This little sari-sari on the front of a concrete house out past the cane fields. Shelves of shampoo sachets and canned goods, and single sticks of cigarette in a jar. A chest freezer of Coke and Red Horse round the side. Nothing to it, really. But she ran it tight. I watched her sell to the neighbors all afternoon, this coin and that coin, and I could see she wasn't lazy. Discarte, they call it out there, hustling, making do. She had it. I met the kids. Her late brother's 3, the eldest a girl of about 14, shy, always with a book. And the little ones. They called me Tito, which is uncle, and hid behind Rosalie's legs and giggled. I hadn't had a kid look at me like that well, Cheryl and I never had any. Couldn't. So that was a whole thing I'd never had. A house full of noise, roosters going at 4 in the morning, church bells Sunday, some neighbor murdering a Whitney Houston number on the karaoke every single night till you wanted to go over there and unplug it yourself. And I loved it. God help me, I loved it. After 3 years of a house so quiet you could hear the fridge hum, all that noise felt like being plugged back into the mains. And the mother. Rosalie's mother, Nanay Elena, this tiny woman, all in a house dress, couldn't have been 5 foot, ran the whole family from a plastic chair on the porch. She took my big rough hand in both of hers and held it and said, "Thank you, Po. Thank you for my Rosalie. God sent you." And she had tears in her eyes when she said it. I want you to hear me on this. I don't think she was acting. I've turned that moment over 1,000 times since, and I still don't think there was a con in it. She meant it. In her mind, God had sent this big Kano to look after her daughter, and that was a blessing, plain as day. That's the thing nobody tells you about this. It's not all snakes. Sometimes it's a genuinely kind old woman who genuinely believes you were sent by God, and that belief still ends up costing you everything, because of what comes attached to it. Both things can be true. I know that now. Here's where the first money went. Real money, I mean, not my own plane ticket. A typhoon had come through a couple weeks before I landed. Negros gets battered, and it had wrecked half her stock. Rain got into the store, ruined the rice, the crackers, spoiled a load of goods. She hadn't said a word about it online. I only found out because I saw the water line on the wall and asked. And even then, she brushed it off, said she'd build it back up slow. So I offered. She said no. I offered again. She said no again, properly embarrassed. Wouldn't look at me. I had to near enough force it on her. In the end, I gave her $90,000 to restock the whole shop and fix the shelving. About $2,350. Nothing to me. Genuinely nothing. And the way she cried when I did it, you'd have thought I'd handed her the moon. And that, right there, that's the moment I'd point to, if you asked me where it started. Not because she asked. She didn't. She fought me on it. But because of what I learned about myself that afternoon. I learned that giving felt good. That's the trap. And it had nothing to do with her. For 3 years, I'd been needed every hour of the day. And then I was needed by nobody. And here was this feeling back again. Being the man who fixes it. The man who makes it right. Being useful. I'd have paid a lot more than $2,150s for that feeling. Turns out, over the next while, I did. I flew home after 2 weeks with her crying at the little airport and me feeling 10 years younger. Told Doug all about it. And Doug, again, went quiet and said, "The mother thanked God, did she?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Nothing, just pace yourself, Murray." I didn't pace myself. Didn't have it in me. I'd found the one thing that filled the quiet, and I wasn't about to go slow on it. The requests started after I got home. And here's the thing. For a good while, they weren't even requests. Not really. They were just life. Her life, that I'd gone and made myself part of. First one was the mother. Nanay Elena's blood pressure. She'd been on maintenance meds, losartan, the little pills. You get them at the Mercury drug in town. And money being what it was, she'd been splitting the doses or skipping days to make a box last. Rosalie mentioned it in passing, not asking, just telling me about her day, that her Nane had gone dizzy and had to lie down. I asked what the meds cost for a proper month's supply. No rationing. 1,500 pesos. Maybe 2,000 with the other bits. About $36 to $48. Are you joking? I sent it that night through Gcash and told her, that's a standing thing now. Every month, I don't want to hear about her mother splitting pills to save $40. Ever. And I felt good about it. I want to be honest with you the whole way through this, because if I dress it up, it's no use to anybody. Every one of these, in the moment, felt good. That's the part that ought to scare you. Then it was the eldest niece, the bookish one, the 14-year-old. Well, she was heading into her last years of school, and there were fees, and a uniform, and a load of little costs the school piled on. Rosalie was already paying it out of the store, scraping. I took it over. Couple thousand pesos here, 3,000 there. Then the boy needed enrolling somewhere better because the local one was rough. That was 18,000 for the year, about $430. Nothing to me. Genuinely, at that point, still nothing to me. You see how it goes? Not one of these is a scam. Not one of these is a woman inventing a dead water buffalo. These were real kids with real school fees and a real old woman with real high blood pressure, and I had 200 grand sitting in an account doing sod all. Where's the villain? Show me the villain. There isn't one. That's what took me so long. By about the 6-month mark, I'd set up a monthly. Just easier that way. 25,000 a month into her Gcash, roughly $600 to cover the family, the mother's meds, the kids, the food, top up the store. And I told myself that was that. That was the budget. A nice round number. Very sensible. Except it never was that. The monthly was the floor, not the ceiling. On top of the P25,000, there was always something. Always. A cousin's tricycle broke down, and he couldn't work without it. P8,000. Somebody's tooth. A fiesta coming up and the family hosting, and you can't host a fiesta with nothing on the table, that's shame in front of the whole barangay, so P15,000 for the lechon and the rest. A typhoon again. The roof. Always a roof. In Negros. And I paid. Every time. Because, and here's where you've got to understand something I didn't back then. In her world, once you're in, you're family. And family carries the family. All of it. There's this thing they've got. Utang na loob. Debt of gratitude. I've read all about it since, done my homework the way I should have done it before. It means when somebody does you a kindness, you owe them deep, for life. But it runs the other way too, in a marriage-type thing. Me giving to Nanay Elena didn't make her grateful in a way that squared the books. It made Rosalie owe me, and it bound me in, deeper, to all of them. Every peso I gave the mother tied Rosalie tighter to me, and tied me tighter to the whole clan. The giving didn't reduce the obligation. It fed it. I didn't know any of that. I thought I was just a decent bloke helping his girlfriend's family through a rough patch. And they thought, genuinely thought, most of them, that God had sent a Kano to be the family's blessing. Their word, blessing. There's millions of Filipinos working abroad, OFWs, sending money home to keep whole families afloat. That's just how it's done there. The one who can provides for the ones who can't. In their eyes, I'd just signed up to be that, the overseas provider. Except I wasn't a daughter working a hard job in Dubai. I was a lonely widower who'd mistaken all this for love and hadn't read the fine print because nobody'd handed me any. Doug tried. I'll give him that. Somewhere in there, he rang me and asked, flat out, "How much you sending over now, Murray?" Ballpark. And I fudged it. Told him a number lower than it was, which you only lie about a number when part of you already knows it's too big. I remember hanging up and being annoyed at him. Who's he to judge? Married one himself. But that was me picking the annoyance because it was easier than the arithmetic. I did the arithmetic once, around then. Sat down one night at the kitchen table with the whiteboard still on the wall. Cheryl's afternoon pills, still there. I still hadn't wiped it. And I actually added it up. The monthly, the meds, the school, the extras, the flights. First 10, 11 months, I was already the wrong side of $25,000. And you'd think that'd stop a careful man. A man who priced every job to the dollar for 40 years. It didn't. You know what I did instead? I stopped adding it up. Told myself counting it was, this is the exact word that went through my head, ungrateful. Like keeping a tally on people you love was a dirty thing to do. That's how far gone I was. I'd taken the one habit that might have saved me, the counting, and decided it made me a bad man. There was one evening on a video call. The whole family crammed onto the little sofa to say hello to Tito Murray, all waving, the karaoke going next door, as per usual, somebody doing My Way badly, and the baby of the family holding up a drawing she'd done of me, big and square with a yellow hard hat, because Rosalie had told them what I did. And I sat there in Fort McMurray, 40 below outside, grinning like a fool at a screen full of people who lit up when they saw me. And I thought, this is worth it. Whatever it costs, this is worth it. I think about that evening a lot now, because I wasn't wrong exactly. It was worth something. It just wasn't worth what it turned out to cost. And by then, I'd stopped keeping the receipts that would have told me. That was around when Rosalie first mentioned the house. Just gently. Just that if I was going to keep coming to stay, it'd be nicer if there was a proper room. A real room. For me. I said, that sounds like a grand idea. The room was never going to be just a room. I know that now. But you have to understand how it got sold to me, because it's the same trick every time. Not their trick, mind. My own trick. The one I played on myself. It started sensible. A proper concrete room off the back of the family house, tiled, own bathroom, a decent bed. So when I flew over, I wasn't sweating in a hotel in the city an hour away from everybody. Made sense. Rosalie had a fella come round, a cousin who did construction. Everybody's got a cousin who does construction. And he quoted it at about $250,000. Call it $6,000. For a solid room with plumbing, in Negros, that's not mad. I'd priced enough jobs in my life to know it wasn't a wild number. So I said yes, and I sent the first $250,000, and I felt like a man building something. After 3 years of tearing my life down, selling the house, selling Cheryl's mother's place, watching everything go, here I was putting something up. You don't know what that does for a fella like me. Building. It's the opposite of a funeral. Then the quote grew. It always grows. Once the cousin got going, it turned out the old foundation wouldn't take the extension. So that had to be dug out and redone. P60,000. Then, if we're pouring new foundation anyway, be daft not to run it a bit bigger. And while we're at it, the family's own roof was in a state, so we may as well tie the new roof into a proper new one over the whole house. For the drainage, you understand? Very practical. Another $180,000. Then tiles, then a water tank because the pressure was no good, then rebar prices jumped. Then the rainy season came and stopped everything for 6 weeks, with the block half built and the rebar going rusty in the wet, and me still sending money the whole time to keep the crew on. I'm not going to give you every number because I didn't keep them, and I've told you why. I'd decided counting made me a bad man. But that P250,000 room was north of P1.2 million by the time it had a door on it. About $29,000 for a room. And here's the thing you already know, and I didn't. I couldn't own an inch of it. Not the room, not the house, not the ground it stood on. A foreigner can't own land in the Philippines, full stop. Not through marriage, not through anything. Best you can do is a condo in some tower in Cebu or Manila. And even then, only if the building's less than 40% foreigners. A concrete room on family land in a barangay outside Bacolod? That was Nanay Elena's land, in Nanay Elena's name, and it stayed that way. I was pouring pension money into a house I could be told to leave any day of the week. Any expat who's been out there 5 minutes could have told me that. I just never asked the question because I didn't want the answer. I flew back over when it was done. Second proper visit. 3 weeks this time. And it was, I'll be straight with you, it was one of the best 3 weeks of my life. And also, the 3 weeks the whole thing started to turn. And both those are true at once. The room was lovely. They'd done it up for me. Even had a little sign the youngest had painted, Tito Murray's room. First night I sat on that bed, listening to the rain hammer the new roof I'd paid for, and the karaoke going next door, always the karaoke. Some fella 3 houses down who only knew My Way and the theme from Titanic. And I thought, I've got a place here, a family. I'm home. But 3 weeks is longer than 2. 3 weeks, you start to see the shape of things. I noticed I was the only one who worked. I'd get up early. Rig habits, you never lose them. And the house would be full of grown men. Rosalie's cousin, an uncle, a couple of the younger ones. Fit lads. And they'd be sat about all day on the porch on their phones, or off playing basketball on the court by the chapel, and coming back for the food I was paying for. Nobody was out looking for work. Why would they? There was a cano now, and I noticed the room. My room. Tito Murray's room. The nicest room in the house by a mile. 3 weeks in, I clocked that when I wasn't sleeping in it. It was where the family sat. The good telly was in there. The kids did homework in there. It wasn't my room. It was the family's best room that I slept in twice a year and paid for all year. I said something to Rosalie about it. Careful, gentle, not wanting a row. Asked her, when did she think the family might get on their own feet a bit? The cousins, the working-age ones. When might the support ease off, even a little? And she looked at me, not angry, confused, genuinely, honestly confused, like I'd asked why water's wet. And she said, but Murray, they are my family. That was it. That was her whole answer. They are my family. As if that settled it. Because to her, it did. In her head, there was no version of the world where you had money and your family went without. None. It wasn't greed. It wasn't a scam. It was the water she swam in. Supporting the whole lot of them wasn't a burden she'd tricked me into. It was just what a decent person with means did, and she couldn't for the life of her see why I was even asking. And I sat there and I understood, for about 1 clear second, that we were never going to agree on this. Not because either of us was wrong, because we were standing in 2 completely different worlds and calling them both family. Then I let the clear second go, because I didn't want it. I flew home, kept sending the monthly, kept topping it up, told myself the cultural stuff would sort itself out, that once we were properly settled, it'd calm down. Man tells himself all sorts, when the alternative is admitting he's poured 29 grand into a room he doesn't own, for a family that'll never, ever stop needing. That night in my room, listening to that rain, that was the top of the hill. Everything after that was the way down. I just didn't feel it start to tip yet. The fiesta was the barangay's patron saint. Big one. The family was hosting a good chunk of it, which meant I was hosting it. and I'd wired over the money for the lechon and the drinks and all the rest, without much thought by then. It was just what happened in October. I flew over for it. Third visit. And it was at that fiesta, with a plate of pancit in my hand and a warm red horse sweating in the heat, that the whole thing finally came apart. Not with a bang. With an uncle. There's an uncle. Every family's got one. Tearing Boy. They called him. I never did get the real name straight. Some nickname from when he was a kid. Rosalie's late brother's uncle by marriage, or something down that line. I could never keep the family tree straight. There's about 90 of them. And Tearing Boy liked his Tandway. He'd been at it since noon. He came and sat by me on the plastic chairs, away from the noise a bit. The karaoke going, of course. Somebody's auntie doing Total Eclipse of the Heart. And I mean really doing it. And he put his arm round me, all friendly, and he started talking. And this is the thing about drink. It makes some men honest when nobody asked them to be. He said, "Murray, you are a good man, the best. You know what they call you?" And he laughed, this wet laugh. "The ATM, since the beginning. Tito ATM." And he thought that was hilarious, patted my chest. "No offense, huh? It's a joke. We love you." I didn't say anything. I've told you, I go quiet. 40 years of not saying the thing on the rig, you get good at holding a face. So I just sat there and let him keep going. Because a man who's started confessing, you don't interrupt him. And he kept going. Told me the family had already decided. Past tense, already sorted between them, that the next big one was going to be the middle cousin's schooling in Cebu. A proper college. And they were only waiting for the right moment to have Rosalie bring it up with me. Waiting for the right moment. Like weather. Like something you time. He told me the roof we'd done, half of that money had gone on the mother's other daughter's debts down in Cabancalan. Not the roof at all. He told me, laughing the whole time, no idea, none, that he was taking a hammer to the whole thing. That when I'd asked Rosalie about the family standing on their own feet, she'd cried about it after, to her mother. And her mother had said, "Don't worry, the Kano won't leave. He has no one. Where's he going to go?" He has no one. Where's he going to go? That one. That's the one that went in like a blade, because it was true. That was the whole reason the whole thing had worked. Not a lie they'd told me. A true thing they'd noticed about me, and built on. I want to be very careful here, because it'd be easy to tell you this was the moment I found out it was all a scam. It wasn't, because it wasn't all a scam. That's what makes it worse, in a way. If Tearing Boy had told me Rosalie never loved me, that it was cold from day one, I could have hated her clean and gone home. But that's not what he told me. He told me the opposite, near enough. The mother saying he has no one wasn't cruelty, in her mind. It was reassurance. It meant Rosalie didn't have to worry. It meant the blessing would stay. They weren't cackling in the dark plotting against me. They genuinely liked me. And they were also, all of them, completely certain that a man with money and no family of his own existed to be the family's provider, and that this was not a thing that needed hiding, because it was not a thing that was wrong. Tito ATM said with affection. That's the part that still gets me. It wasn't an insult. It was a nickname. You give nicknames to people you're fond of. I got up, told Tearing Boy I needed the toilet, and I went and stood round the side of the house, by the water tank I'd paid for, next to the new wall I'd paid for, under the new roof I'd paid for, on the ground I would never in my life own, and I did the sum. Right there. For the first time in over a year, I let myself actually count it. 18 months. The restocking. The monthly. times 18. The meds, the kids' schooling, the fiestas, plural, the tricycle, the teeth, the debts I now knew about, and the ones I didn't, and the room that ate about $29,000 on its own. All in, and I stood there and made myself total it properly, no flinching. I was somewhere north of $70,000, 70,000 Canadian dollars, out of the roughly 210 I'd got for 2 houses and a lifetime of freezing my backside off on a rig. 30-odd% of everything I had. Gone into a family that had a pet name for me? And here's what I want you to understand, because it matters. I didn't feel my heart break out there by the water tank. I've had my heart broken. I watched Cheryl die by inches. I know exactly what that feels like. And this wasn't that. What I felt was colder than that. Older. It was the feeling you get on a rig when you realize the reading you've been trusting. All shift is wrong, and has been wrong for hours, and everything you built on top of it has to come down. Not sad, just clear. Horribly, finally clear. I went back to the fiesta, smiled, ate my pancit, sang no songs. I don't sing, but I clapped for the ones who did. Kissed Nanay Elena's hand good night when it was time, because she was still, underneath all of it, a kind old woman who thought God had sent me, and I couldn't even be angry at her for that. But something had gone out of me and gone cold, and I'd made a decision standing by that water tank. A rig decision. The kind you make flat and quiet, and don't argue yourself out of. I didn't confront Rosalie. Didn't have the row. What would have been the point? She'd have cried, and I still can't tell you to this day how much of her crying was real. I think a lot of it, that's the hell of it. And her mother would have reassured her again. He won't leave. He has no one. They were about to find out that the man with no one had spent 40 years learning exactly how to shut a thing down, and that he'd already started. I didn't do it there. That's the thing people get wrong when I tell them the short version. They picture me flipping a table at the fiesta, shouting the place down. No, I flew home first, sat on that plane out of Bacolod with the whole sum in my head, and I didn't feel a thing, which is its own kind of warning, that flatness. Rig flat. The reading's wrong, and you just start shutting valves. Here's what I did, and I'll tell it plain, because it's the part the title of this whole thing is about, and I'm not proud of the neatness of it, but I'm not ashamed either. First thing, back in Fort McMurray, I stopped the monthly. Didn't announce it. Just the first of the month came and went, and no P25,000 landed in her Gcash. Then I moved money. The bulk of what I had left I put where it couldn't be got at on a sad message impulse at 2 in the morning, which is how most of it had gone in the first place. I know myself. A weak man who knows he's weak can still build himself a fence. The messages started about day 3. Where's the load, Po? Then, is everything okay, my love? Then the mother's not well, the pharmacy, the boys' enrollment, all the usual weather. And for the first time in 18 months, I just looked at them. Didn't reply with money. Didn't reply much at all. And then I did the thing. The room, the house, I couldn't own a brick of it. We've been through that. Foreigner, can't own land. The whole extension sat on Nanay Elena's title. But I'd never actually handed it over. The money for the build had gone through my name to the contractor. And more to the point, the family had been living rent-free off my monthly in a house I'd rebuilt, and the arrangement that paid for all of it. That was mine to end. So I ended it. I told Rosalie, on a call, flat and quiet, that I was done. That the money was finished. All of it. And that the family living in that house on my funding, that was finished too. I'd already spoken to the one cousin who'd never taken a peso off me, the only one who worked a real job, down in Bacolod proper. Told him the truth of it, and I arranged, through him, that the extended lot, the uncles, the idle cousins, Tearing Boy, all the ones who'd moved into the good rooms, were to be out. The mother could stay. Rosalie could stay. But the clan that had installed itself on my dime, feathering the nest I'd built and calling me Tito ATM while they did it, they were going back to wherever they'd been before the Cano came along. Rosalie had no idea it was coming. That's the honest truth, and it's an ugly one. To her it came out of a clear sky, because in her world I'd broken no rule. I'd only stopped being what a good provider is supposed to be. She cried. God, she cried. Down the phone for the better part of a week. And I'll tell you what I told you at the fiesta. I still cannot tell you how much of that crying was real. I think a good deal of it was. I think she did love me, in her way, the same way she'd have loved a good harvest. Grateful, and needing it, and not able to fully tell the two apart. Same as me, if I'm honest. I couldn't tell the difference between being loved and being needed either. That was the whole disease. We had that in common, her and me. We were both a bit starved, and we both mistook the feeling of being full for something purer than it was. I didn't go back. Blocked most of the numbers, kept the one cousins, so I'd know if Nane Elena ever really was ill. She was still, under all of it, a kind old woman who'd held my hand and thanked her God for me. And I couldn't make her the villain. She wasn't. There wasn't one. I keep saying that because it's the truest thing in the whole story, and it's the thing nobody wants to hear. You want a villain. There isn't one. There's just a lonely man with money, and a poor family with need, and a culture that told all of them that the arrangement between us was love. And maybe, some days, it even was. So, where's Murray now? Back in Alberta. Same town, smaller place. I never bought another house. Couldn't face the quiet of a big one. Out about $85,000 all told, once you count the last of the build and the flights and everything I sent after I'd already started suspecting and kept sending anyway. Because suspecting and stopping are two very different muscles. 85 grand. Not destroyed. I want to be clear about that, because some of the fellas in these stories lose the lot, and I didn't. I've still got a pension, and a good bit of the settlement, and a paid-off truck. I got out with most of my shirt. That makes me one of the lucky ones, and I know it. But it cost me more than money. And this is the bit I'd want you to hear if you hear nothing else. It cost me the thing I'd gone looking for in the first place. For 18 months I felt needed again. Useful. Plugged back into the mains after 3 years of a dead quiet house. And it was a lie. Not because they didn't care, but because that feeling, the being needed, I'd been buying it, renting it, P25,000 at a time. And a thing you rent, you never really had. Doug and I are all right, by the way. He rang when he heard. Didn't say I told you so, which is the mark of a real friend, because God knows he had it earned. He just said, "You warned yourself, you daft goat. You read every one of those stories, and you still walked in." And he's right. That's the part that keeps me up. It wasn't that I didn't know. I knew. I'd done the homework. I just wanted the warm, noisy house more than I wanted to be right. Here's my wisdom, for what a roughneck's wisdom is worth. Generosity without a boundary isn't love. It's a leak. And a leak will empty a man just as surely as a thief will. Slower, quieter, and with everybody smiling at you the whole way down, so you never even hear it running. If you're lonely, and I mean the real kind, the kind that lives in a house after somebody's gone, that's not a wallet you're carrying into these things. It's a wound. And people can smell a wound. Not always to rob you, sometimes just to lean on it. Doesn't much matter which, when you're the one bleeding out. Set the boundary before the loneliness sets it for you. That's it. That's the whole of what I've got. I still think about that karaoke some nights. My way, badly, 3 houses down. Isn't that a laugh? Of all the things to miss. That's Murray's story, and I want to sit with you a moment on why we told it, because this one doesn't fit the shape people expect. There's no villain in it. Murray said that himself, over and over. And he's right. Rosalie wasn't a con artist. Nana Elena wasn't a schemer. What Murray walked into wasn't a scam. It was a genuine collision between a grieving Western man who'd never learned the local rules and a family living inside a cultural expectation as old and as real as the sugarcane. That a person with means provides for the ones without. That family carries family. All of it. No exceptions. To them, that isn't exploitation. It's decency. And a lonely man who couldn't tell the difference between being loved and being needed handed them 30-odd% of everything he had before he learned the language of the place he'd married into. If you're watching this, and any of it landed close to home, the empty house, the warm face on the screen who never asks, the small reasonable requests that only ever grow. Hear the 2 things Murray paid to learn. Understand utang na loob and the whole web of family obligation before you send a single peso, because that web is genuine, it is powerful, and it will not bend to your Western idea of just us two. And know that love isn't measured in what you transfer. If the affection only flows while the money does, you already have your answer, and it costs nothing to find out. Murray got out with most of it intact. His savings, his dignity, and something a lot of these men lose entirely. The ability to look back without pure hatred. He left angry at the arrangement, not the people. That's a harder, cleaner way to carry a thing like this, and I hope it serves him. That's all for this one. Look after yourselves. Look after that lonely hour when it comes for you. And don't let it do your arithmetic. I'm signing off for Inside the Philippines. Take care of yourselves out there.